Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon His last messenger Muhammad, and upon all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. We welcome you once again, dear viewers, to another episode on the Hereafter, another in a series of Islamic programs presented to you by Sharjah Satellite Television from Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. We've been talking about the Day of Judgment and the situation on that day of, we said we would break it up into three different groups. The situation of the disbelievers, the situation of the Muslims but who had committed sins, and the situation of the righteous. What is the situation, their situation on that day? And we started by looking at the situation of the disbelievers on the Day of Judgment. And we're discussing and talking, describing some of the things happening on this day. We mentioned hadith of the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, in which he said, the sun would descend on the creation the distance of a mil. Now, it is said that the word mil in Arabic, it means a distance. It can mean a distance, or it's also used sometimes to mean this rod. It's a little stick which is used to apply kohl, which is like a makeup that they use for the eyes, like an eyeliner. So it's a very small distance. The sun will descend above the heads of the creation, the distance of a mil, a very small distance. So that the sun will be basically right above the heads of the people on that day. And in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he said, the people will sweat according to their deeds. Some of them, they would sweat, and the sweat would soak the earth, and then it would reach their ankles. And some of them, their sweat would reach their knees. And some of them, the sweat would reach their shoulders. Some of them, the sweat would reach their necks. And some of them would be drowning in their sweat. So, the worse the sins are, the worse that the sins are that the person had committed, the more of the sins, and the worse the sins are that the person committed, the more that person would sweat. Because they are suffering from the heat of the sun. They are suffering more from the heat of the sun. But the righteous people on that day are under what? The righteous people on that day are under the arsh of Allah. They are under the throne of Allah. The day when the sun will come, the distance of a mil, a very close distance, a very small distance above the heads of the creation, the people are sweating according to their deeds. The people who have a few sins, they're sweating, it's soaking the earth. Some people up to their ankles, some people more, up to their necks, some people are drowning. The ones who have many sins, major sins, they're drowning in their sweat. But some people will be, on that day, under the shade of the arsh of Allah, under the shade of the throne of Allah. So, according to the person's deeds, they would sweat on that day. On that day, the people, they'll be sweating. And the people under the arsh of Allah, this is the righteous people. And we'll talk later about what types of people will enjoy the shade under the arsh of Allah. Because on this day, the only shade is the shade of the arsh of Allah, the shade of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everybody else will be standing, and the sun is right above their heads, and they're sweating, and the only shade that day is the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's arsh, His throne. And only certain types of people will be under the arsh. It's not something that just anybody can run and seek shelter under the shade. No, there are certain categories, certain types of people who will be safe in under the shade of the arsh of Allah. And we will discuss this in the future. So right now we're talking about the situation of the wrongdoers, the disbelievers, the evildoers, what have you. And so another situation that the oppressors would go through, and Allah describes this in Quran. And by the way, a lot of the ayat, a lot of the verses in the Quran, it demands some imagination on our part. A lot of the ayat and the descriptions that Allah gives, if you don't imagine, if you don't use your imagination, you're not going to understand and get the right perception of the ayah, get the right perception of the verse. In Quran there is taswir. There's taswir in it, and Allah gives you images. Allah will describe things giving you images. And especially when we're talking about al-akhirah, when we're talking about the hereafter. Allah uses these images in many places in order to convey to you the information. So that you use your imagination, you get these images, and it conveys to you the information. So Allah says about the oppressors, the wrongdoers in the Quran, on the day the wrongdoer will bite on his hands in regret. He will say, "Oh, I wish I had taken with the messenger away." This is from chapter 25, verse 27. Allah tells us the wrongdoer, the oppressor, the evildoer, on the day the wrongdoer will bite on his hands in regret. Out of regret he's biting on his hands. And he will say, "Oh, I wish I had taken with the messenger away." Now, when you are in an extreme state of regret, you're regretting something very much, in an extreme state of regret, you could bite on your finger. And you feel pain. You're biting on your finger, you feel pain. Allah did not say, in this verse, Allah did not say that these people are biting on their finger. He did not say that they're biting on their fingers, many fingers. And Allah did not say that they're biting on their hand. Allah said they're biting on both hands. Allah said when the wrongdoers would bite their both hands, bite on their hands, both hands, not just one, both hands. So imagine the scene of somebody pushing his hands, both of his hands, into his mouth, and crushing, biting down and crushing on the bones and the flesh, and tearing the hands apart, and not feeling the pain of this. That person, on the day he's pushing his hands in his mouth, both of his hands, biting down on his hands in regret, crushing, cutting through the flesh and crushing the bones and what have you, and not feeling the pain, because the pain of regret is more. The regret the person on that day is feeling is so great that they're biting on their hands, both their hands, and they're not feeling that pain because the pain of regret is more intense, is more. Even though regret is psychological pain. But imagine that there would be so much regret for these people that even when that person bites both of their hands, that physical pain that they feel when they bite both of their hands, the physical pain that they feel would be less than the psychological pain that they are feeling because of the regret that they have in their hearts. Why? Why are they feeling regret? Because I wish that I had followed the messenger. Oh, I wish that I had taken away with the messenger. I wish that I had followed the messenger. What are they regretting? That they didn't follow the messenger, the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him. That they didn't follow him, they didn't follow the message with which he was sent. And due to that regret, on the Day of Judgment, they're putting both of their hands in their mouth, biting their hands out of regret. And that physical pain of biting on both of the hands is less than the psychological pain of regret that they are feeling for what? For not following the way of the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him. Allah says, and the day the hour appears, the day that the hour appears, the criminals will be in despair. This is chapter 30, verse 12. The criminals, the disbelievers, the ones who rejected faith, they give up. They will be in despair. And they will just give up. There's no argument. On that day, there's no argument. Who are you going to argue with? Who will you take your case to? Who are you going to argue with? When you see the truth, when you see the haqq, on that day when they see it, they're in despair. They'll give up. They know there's no who to argue with. Who will I go to? They will completely lose all hope. And we see, as in the previous ayah, the regret, the pain of regret that they will go through. Allah says, that day, those who would completely, those who disbelieved, on that day, those who disbelieved and disobeyed the messenger, will wish they could be covered by the earth and they will not conceal from Allah a single statement. This is from chapter 4, verse 42. So on that day, these people, the disbelievers, the wrongdoers, evildoers, the oppressors, what have you, the criminals, they will completely lose all hope. They will be in despair. They're suffering from regret. And they will wish that they could be covered by the earth. This is a person who was so attached to the dunya, so attached to this world. This is a person who was willing to sell their religion, for a miser return, for nothing. They were willing to give it up for a small piece of this world. A person who loved and valued life so much. A person who may have killed for a small piece of this world. A person who cheated and oppressed for a small piece of this world. On the Day of Judgment, that person would ask Allah, the Exalted, to level him. That person will ask Allah, level me with the earth. Level me with the earth, with the dirt. Cover me with the dirt. Allah says in another ayah, I wish that I was dirt. That they will say, I wish that I was dirt. Oh, that I were dirt. This is from chapter 78 in verse number 40. It is mentioning that they will say, I wish that I was dirt. These are people who had so many desires and had so much hopes and so many aspirations and plans what to do, and on the Day of Judgment they will wish that they were dirt. When they see the reality of the situation, when they see the reality of the situation of that day, they will wish that they were dirt. The people who spent their whole life, had such hopes and dreams and aspirations in this world, running after this world, committing all kinds of sin and crime and what have you, wrongdoing, in order to obtain a small piece of this world. On the Day of Judgment, they will suffer from regret, they will suffer from despair, they will lose all hope, and they will wish that they were dirt. They will ask Allah, cover us with the earth, cover us with the dirt. They will wish that they were dirt. This tells you that we are living in a state of a dream. This world that we have is not the reality. This world that we are living in is not the reality. We were not created for this world. And the reality will come after death. The eyes will open and we will see the reality. But then it is too late. So the next section that we want to talk about in regards to the situation of the disbelievers on the Day of Judgment is the voiding of deeds. This is some of the sufferings that they will, the disgrace and the degradation that they will go through on this day. The next thing we want to talk about in regards to their situation, the situation of the disbelievers or the evildoers, the oppressors, what have you, their situation on the Day of Judgment is the voiding of deeds. All of their deeds would be voided, crossed out, nothing, unaccepted. Allah says, but the disbelievers, their deeds are like a mirage in a lowland, which a thirsty one thinks is water, until when he comes to it, he finds it is nothing, but finds Allah before him, and He will pay him His full, and He will pay him in full His due, and Allah is swift in account. This is from chapter 24, verse 39 of the Quran. So a mirage is when you are in a very hot area, like a desert, and you see on the horizon what appears to be water. It's an optical illusion. You see something on the horizon, it's a very hot environment, and you see something on the horizon, it appears to be water. Because of the fumes in the air and the humidity and these things, the eye is getting the perception that there is water on the horizon. And then you keep on going towards it. You see something on the horizon, you think it's water, and you're going towards it, walking towards it, and the more you're going towards it, the farther and farther away it's getting farther and farther away. There's nothing. You never reach it. It's a mirage. It's an optical illusion. Looks like water, seems like water, the eye is fooled, and the person is going after it, but the person never reaches it. Allah uses this as an illustration of the deeds of the disbelievers. Their deeds are like a mirage in a desert. And they're rushing towards that water. They're rushing towards that mirage, and there's nothing. So when they approach it, they find nothing. What do they find there? What do they find waiting for them there? They would not find their deeds, but they would find Allah. And Allah would then give them their dues, and that is the punishment. That day they'll be rushing towards their deeds, their deeds are like a mirage in the desert. They're rushing towards it. They think they have something there. When they reach it, they don't find their deeds. They find nothing. What do they find? They find Allah there waiting for them. And Allah will give them their due. And what is their due? That is the punishment for what they did in this world. Allah also gives another representation, another example. Allah says, "Or they are like darknesses within an unfathomable sea, which is covered by waves, upon which are waves, over which are clouds. Darkness, some of them upon others. When one puts out his hand therein, he can hardly see it. And he to whom Allah has not granted light, for him there is no light." This is from chapter 24, verse 40 of the Quran. So for these people, their deeds are darkness. And the more they do, the more darkness accumulates, to the extent that one of them would extend their hand out, and they can't even see it. They will extend their hand out in front of them, and they can't even see it. And this will actually happen to them. This will actually happen literally on the Day of Judgment. They will lose light on As-Sirat. As-Sirat, we know that on the Day of Judgment, As-Sirat is very dark. And the believers on that day, they'll be given light. And the ones who rejected faith in Allah, it will be dark for them. They'll have no light. And it would be pitch black. One of them, they'd extend their hand in front of their face, right in front of their eyes, and they can't even see it. This is one analogy that Allah gives to these deeds, the deeds of the disbelievers, of the wrongdoers, oppressors, that their deeds are like darkness. Allah gives another analogy where Allah says in the Quran, what they spend in the life of this material world is like that of a wind containing frost, which strikes the harvest of a people who have wronged themselves and destroys it. And Allah has not wronged them, but they have wronged themselves. This is from chapter 3, verse 117. So Allah is giving an analogy in regards to the money that these people spend. A lot of money is spent in order to fight Islam. A lot of money was spent to fight Islam before. And a lot of money is spent today for this purpose. This just to prevent the spread of Islam, to prevent Islam from spreading or what have you, much money is spent. And so Allah says that this money that is spent against Islam, or any money that they spend, that Allah says the likeness of what they spend in this world is like a very cold wind, a frost that blows over the harvest and it destroys it. With that, dear viewers, we'd like to end for this episode. We hope that you have enjoyed it and hope that you will continue to join us in the future. Until the next time, we bid you all farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.